Hi, I'm Martin Jarvis, and once again I want to welcome you to another perspective. Why success stories often leave out the suffering, and why you shouldn't ignore yours. That's what we're going to talk about today. First, what's the purpose of a success story? The purpose of a success story is, or should be, to inspire others. Okay? And leaving out the failures and suffering. That's why suffering would equate to failures. Leaving out the failures and the suffering in a success story is like presenting someone with a roadmap to a destination, having left out more than half of the directions to get there. It's just not going to work. It's useless. It's not going to help. And so we're going to examine this today because we do have a tendency to hide the suffering, to hide the failures, to hide the mistakes, and just to present the victory. But what I want to suggest to you today is that a success story without the hurdles, without the roadblocks, without the barriers and the suffering and the failure, it is of no use. It reminds me of the individual, the visitor that goes to a church, walks in the door and sees all these beautiful, fine-looking people dressed up and looking good, husbands and wives and children, everybody happy. And the individual begins to think, what about me? My situation at home's all jacked up. Because he walks into the church with no pretense, simply as he is, suffering through certain situations in his life, relational issues even. And he's thinking he and his wife are on the verge of divorce. Or if these fine people had only presented an honest picture of themselves, an honest picture of the relationship, that struggles and disagreements and heated conversations are just normal. In a healthy marriage, this guy would be encouraged, okay? So I'm suggesting then that we need to begin presenting an honest picture of how we got where we got when we are successful. Because it's not only good for the people who are looking at us, people who have aspirations of becoming like us, becoming successful as well in life. It's for your children. Your children are watching. And if all they're hearing are all your victories and they don't see the struggles and even the failures, the drop balls, the fumbles and all, they're gonna be living life in its reality, and they're going to be fumbling, they're going to be dropping the balls, and they're going to be simply feeling like they're losers, a loser mentality because they can't do what daddy did or what mommy did. When in reality, neither could daddy or mommy. Because in every success story, as we look back and try to think back on the paths that we came, first of all, nobody made it without help. Somewhere along the line, somewhere along that path, that journey to where they are today, they had a helping hand. And they wouldn't have made it had that helping hand not been there. Okay? And so when we leave out that helping hand, that's the very most important part of the journey. Your testimony of success isn't the finish line. Your testimony of success is the path, the journey it took to get you to the finish line, all the things you had to go through, all the near failures, the failures, and those situations where you would not have survived if someone had not stepped in. Even in businesses today, we recognize that most businesses, new businesses, fail in the first 5 years. And of those businesses that are successful, most of those are going to fail in the next 5 years. Why? Oftentimes because of no capital, okay? And so when situations arise, like today, for example, where we see where the government, might be trying some things and might be withholding funds from certain nonprofit organizations. If that nonprofit organization doesn't have a surplus of finances laid up, it's going to be out of business, okay? And so I'm just suggesting that capital is very important. I know my wife is a very, very successful business person, and she's just blowing it up. But I remember when she first started, and there were times, that she couldn't make payroll. And I went to my 401k. and made payroll for her on a couple of occasions. The reason is because I saw the potential in what she was putting her hand to do, and I knew that it would fail if she couldn't make payroll. And so payroll was necessary. I was looking in the future. I was looking down the road. And so if she hadn't had me doing that, she wouldn't be where she is today. And I'm suggesting is a lot of people don't have that. And it's very important that we just come clean and be honest as an encouragement to folks to continue even despite the hurdles, even despite the setbacks. Just don't give up. Because I would venture to say that when you see individuals with a particular success story in a particular area of expertise, that there have been more failures in that individual's business endeavors. And what you're looking at as a great success is simply the one that stuck, the one that made it. It's the same with inventors. I mean, come on, like Thomas Edison and all the failures he had. We know the stories of the light bulb and trying to get it to work and all the failures. But do we remember him and his failures? No. What we remember is that success story, the victory, and what he's well known and renowned for. But as you begin to study his life, you begin to see the struggles that he had and how he almost didn't make it, but he persevered, and finally he came up with, what we're using today in so many ways. I'm just trying to give you an encouragement not to be embarrassed, because your strength is not in your victory. Your strength is in your struggle to get there. Okay, that's it. And I share the story often about my daughter, jumping into the off the pier, into that body of water where we were waiting, for our last and final dive to be scuba certified, and she was scared, and she was frozen, and she was just standing there. And only to learn later that she was standing there crying because she didn't want to jump in because of the air tank, but finally she just jumped in because she had to. So in her own mind, she was dealing with that failure mentality, with that fear, but she was able to surpass it. And I have to believe that, maybe it's because of some of the stories I shared with her in life, that it's not bravery unless you're scared. And that scared, how you respond to being scared, that scared could be the suffering, that scared could be the failure. But what do you do with that? You persevere, and you walk through it, and you work through it, okay? I know coming up, I was 14 years old, and I was like getting that buzz, that's why I started with my friends and all. And when my father found out, he was so mad at me, because, what father, wants their kid to be, doing that weed thing. And he was really upset with me. So my father was a respectable man. He had gone through the ranks. He was an E9, in the military. He had a lot of authority, and he had a master's degree, an MBA, and he was just making all the right moves in life. And he was just so irritated that I was just throwing my life away. And, since I've said, when I was 28 years old, I had my epiphany, and I just gave up all the negative, destructive things I was doing in my life, and that was one of them. But after he passed away, I was speaking to my mother, and she told me, she said, Dad used to do that. He was raised in the Bronx in New York. I guess I should have known. He used to do that when he was young. And I was taken back and somewhat disappointed. Because I recognized that if my father had just shared with me that he had experience in what I was experimenting and enjoying, that I would have put more weight on his word, on his opinion about it. But as far as I was concerned, he had never tried it. He just didn't know how good it was. But you see, he was embarrassed. He was ashamed to share with me that aspect of his life. But I'm telling you, I would have listened more clearly. And I probably would have ceased right then, because I respected my father, and he was like my hero. But in my own mind, he just didn't understand. And I'm afraid that many of the issues that our children go through often are barriers and hurdles and setbacks and failures that could be avoided if we had just shared with them the truth behind. We want to be the hero. I know I was talking to my daughter so many times, growing up. I was really appreciating the rides from like preschool through kindergarten, through all the way up until the 11th grade when she turned 16 and I bought her a car. I enjoyed the conversations we had, the depth of conversation, and all of our conversations were age appropriate. But by the time she got to the 11th grade, we had covered virtually every topic imaginable, okay? And there were no barriers to our conversations, because it was important to me to make sure that she didn't go off into life unarmed, okay? So I shared with her everything. And I remember, I think she was in about the 9th or 10th grade or so, and we were talking about boys. And I was giving her some insight, even some insight into boys, and father needs to tell his daughter, and not holding back, but still being real. And talking about boys, not really putting the blame on boys, because our minds are just not developed yet, but to be careful, be aware. And then she looked at me one evening and she said, "Dad, were you like that?" And at that moment, I felt like I was standing before the crossroads. Am I gonna be honest with my daughter, and no longer be the hero, or am I just going to deny it and try to maintain this elevated status of a dad in her eyes? But I looked at her and I realized that it was more important for her to be well, than for me to maintain this false image of perfection before her eyes. And I said, honey, yeah, I was just like that. And you know what? I still maintained being her hero, and I think I still am today, even though she's 20 years old. But it's important, because to me, all this information that I was sharing with her about what she needed to look out for and what she needed to be careful of in the mindset, of these young boys, if I had told her I really had no experience in this area, she would have thought my opinion was only theory, okay? But I was able to share with her, yes, I know this is true because this is who I was. She was able to put more weight on my opinion, okay? And so I'm suggesting to you, your most powerful success story to the world, and especially to your kids, is the truth. man, when I'm driving down the road, talk about that invisible hand, of guiding. I reckon I see people that are jacked up, on the street, on drugs or homeless or just alcoholics, just messed up, And I see the guys walking down. Sometimes I see girls follow them, and they're just messed up in life. Without a doubt, in my heart, I'm like, but by the grace of God, there go I. And so part of our success stories then, as well as the failures, as well as the roadblocks and the hurdles and all that stuff, is the fact that if it not had been, well, we want to say the invisible hand, or we could say God, or we can divine, interference or whatever, that our wellness could simply be responding to whether we took a left or a right that day. Whether I did something that was totally unrelated but took me down a different path, I really can't take total credit for all of my success, because some of it wasn't even by my choice. It just happened, and good things happened to come as a result of this, result of that. Now, a lot of things did build upon, choices that I made, stop getting that buzz, stop going out, stop partying, stop being in clubs all the night, of course. But there were also things where, even in any of those situations, my life could have taken a drastic hit. I know that there are people, as a young person coming up, you're doing things that are not right, and you're having fun with your buddies, and some things might be a little illegal. I'm not talking about felony illegal, but I'm just talking about things that you shouldn't have done. You could have got jammed up for, and you didn't. And then if you had got jammed up on something little and maybe went to juvenile detention, or maybe did something minor and ended up getting locked up for 30 days, and then somebody you might have met in jail and some ideas, and then from then on building upon a negativity where, because you didn't get jammed up for what you did do, you were able to take on a different path and eventually in life become respectable, where that may not even have been an option had you gone the other path. which may not have seemed that serious, to begin with. I'm just saying that there are so many other factors involved than simply the finish line in our success story. That it's just doing an inservice, it's doing a disservice and an injustice, and not a help at all to folks who might be watching and listening. And really, it's dishonest. When we proclaim I did it all myself, because nobody did it all themselves, nobody. And so that's simply what I'm sharing today, to be honest. And the problem is, it's a problem, of course, for people who are watching you. It's a problem for your kids as well, because they're not getting a real picture, and when they fail, they're going to think, Dad, I'm a real loser. And sometimes they're not even going to share their failures with you. They're going to try to deal with them on their own and try to fix them on their own because they're ashamed of their failures before you. And if we could just share with them, I had the same failure and this is how you fix it, they don't have to go through a lot of the negativity they're going to have to go through, impossible, just simply not making it, okay? And I guess for you as an individual and for me as individuals, one of the most important reasons to us why it benefits us to remember our suffering and our failures is because if we tell, you've heard the old saying, if you tell a lie enough times you begin to believe it. Well, I believe that's true, okay? And so if you tell this success story of yours so many times, time and time again, and it's not quite true, not quite accurate, you eventually begin to believe your own hype. You're believing that. You're thinking you did do it yourself. You're thinking you didn't have any help. You're thinking, why don't you pull yourself up by your bootstraps? I didn't know you didn't. Somebody helped you. And so when we begin to believe our own hype, and then when something actually happens on down the road to us, we're embarrassed, we're humiliated. And they're waiting for us to demonstrate success. And we're forgetting we needed help, and we need help now. And often we find ourselves consumed in the negativity, and we just don't know how to get out because we've forgotten. So most importantly then, as we open, don't forget your suffering. Don't ignore your suffering in your success story, because that's the strength. Your strength isn't in your victory. Your strength is in the road that you took to get there. Well, I hope you got something out of that. And I do appreciate you joining me for another perspective. And I invite you to join me again. You take care. Bye.